Good afternoon, everybody. It's again great to see you all here in person. So welcome to This is Film Heritage in Practice, second session of the seventh edition. My name is Giovanna Fossati. I'm the Chief Curator of iFilm Museum and a professor at the University of Amsterdam, focusing on questions around film heritage. So this year's series is also recorded. As you can see, we have cameras here and will be published online with a delay of a couple of weeks after being edited, and we are trying to include some of the titles screened during the series on the iFilm player. For those who are not familiar with This is Film, this is a collaboration between iFilm Museum and the University of Amsterdam, in particular in the framework of the class This is Film Heritage in Practice, which is a master's class, and the students from This is Film are helping during the sessions, introducing our guests and asking questions. This year, we've decided to focus on an overarching theme: global audiovisual archiving, exchange of knowledge and practices. We chose this topic based on the observation that audiovisual heritage from Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia is hardly visible for audiences online. And that most researchers and curators focus on audiovisual collections that have been preserved, digitized, and made accessible by archives in Europe and North America. And we really feel within the audiovisual archival field that shifting to a more global approach to audiovisual archiving is one of the most urgent priorities today. And with it, we also see the need for increasing exchange of practices and knowledge between film archivists and scholars worldwide, but also between institutional archives and smaller alternative or counter archives. And with the digital turn, we think that there are new opportunities to do this, but we need to work together in that direction. I would also like to take the opportunity, as I did in our first session 2 weeks ago, to express our concern and support for our colleagues at the Dovchenko Center in Kyiv. One of the colleagues working there is in Amsterdam, and we are in contact with her and trying to offer as much support as we can. She's working with us at the archive, and we hope that in one of the following sessions of This is Films, we'll be able to share with you a statement from the colleagues there. Doing their best to take care of a collection in a terrible, horrible circumstance. Now, what else was I planning to say? So every 2 weeks we welcome a guest speaker who will share with us the knowledge and experience of audiovisual realities from which there is still a lot to learn. Will also, the Global Audiovisual Archiving will also be the theme of our annual conference that will convene here at the end of May. And we hope to continue the conversations that we are starting during This is Film there at the conference. The conference works with an advisory board that includes experts active in various countries, again in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, also in Europe and North America. And the members of the advisory board include all the guest speakers who have been invited for the This is Film series. What else during the conference? Yes, so the program will be published within a couple of weeks, and we plan to have approximately 40, even more speakers from very diverse realities from within and outside formalized institutions worldwide. So today we will discuss film heritage in Latin America and the efforts of the Audiovisual Preservation Exchange project to support non-institutional archives and create a platform for international exchange of knowledge and practice. Now I would like to introduce Nook Mutzers, Samuel Smith, and Luis Felipe Miranda, who are students of the This is Film class. And on behalf of the group, Luis will introduce our guest.
Hello, everybody. Juana Suárez is a media and cultural studies scholar and archivist from Colombia, with a PhD in Latin American literature and cinema, a master's degree in literature, and another one in moving image archiving and preservation from the New York University, a program she currently directs. She currently leads 2 research projects. The first one is a digital humanities project in Latin America, focused on collaboration and developing a network and exchange between audiovisual archives in Latin America, and between Latin America and the rest of the world. The second one is focused on transnational mobility and national memory in regard to Colombian filmmakers that have emigrated from the country. She's also working on community archives in Latin America, the history of film festival archives, and the use and reuse of home movies, found footage, and orphan films in Colombian cinema. She worked as an intern with different media archives in the United States, such as the ones at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, the Anthology Film Archives, and the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. She has also been a professor in a number of universities in the United States and Colombia, and has worked as an archives consultant for Proimágenes, an institution devoted to public policy and funding of the film industry in Colombia. Juana has been working for some years already in all the tasks involved for the preservation of the Yurupari TV series, of which we will watch an episode today. She has also been an organizer and participant in the archival exchange program APEX from the NYU program Moving Image Archiving and Preservation, which has held activities in Ghana, Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, Spain, Brazil, and Puerto Rico, plus virtual sessions last year with archives and media collectives in Brazil, Mexico, and Honduras. This year, APEX will take place in Chiapas, Mexico, and a series of workshops are also being organized with the Cinemateca de Bogotá in Colombia to encourage artists to contribute to the stewardship of their own materials. So please, let's welcome Juana Suárez.
Okay, well, welcome, Juana. It's such a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you so much to your students. Thank you for such a generous introduction. Makes me feel very old and very responsible. And thanks everybody for taking some time to come here today and share with us and hear a little bit what what we do with this project.
Thank you. So what we'd like to do in this about 30 minutes conversation with Juana is to ask you to share with us something about your long-standing experience with archives in Latin America. Of course, it's a vast reality, so we are not expecting you to cover it all. But I know how you have collaborated and are still collaborating and being in very close contact with both national archives, smaller archives hidden in other institutions, alternative archives, counter archives. So we'd like to understand a little bit more about these realities, if possible.
Thank you, Joanna. I have a background in literature and cinema. And you know this cliche question when people ask you, what movie changed your life? So I would say that it's a 1926 film, an orphan film. That means the orphanhood of this film is related to authorship, no? Who was the director. But it's a political film made in Colombia, probably, in 1926, about the Pulitzer, Theodore Roosevelt controversy, and Pulitzer accusing Roosevelt of dividing Latin America, and Roosevelt saying that that's a lie, and both of them trying to prove it. It's a very interesting film in the scenario of silent cinema in Colombia, which is a very small country and is not a country that has the strongest industry of cinema in Latin America. Traditionally, the biggest industries had been Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and Cuba. The Cuban, of course, changed a lot during the special period after the fall of the Soviet Union and the new economic measures of the special, what the Cubans call periodo especial, the special period. And then there are like a lot of emerging filmographies, such as the Chilean, the Colombian per se. Now there's a lot of movies produced in Panama. So anyhow, coming back to this film, this is a 1926 film about the separation of Colombia, of Panama from Colombia, which was really provoked by the construction of the canal, the Panama Canal, who is the same architect that built the Suez Canal, etc. So it's a detective film, but I was very intrigued about this film, and I heard the concept of orphan films, and I was very bored at the time, talking about 2007, with what I was doing in my life. I was living in Kentucky, which is not my favorite state in the United States, and also it was a very difficult political period. Obama was about to become president, and then it was not a good place to be. So I decided to abandon my PhD and my tenure career, and I was like, this is it, I'm gonna be an archivist. But I was mainly very curious about this film. And so it's a little bit like pleasure. One thing leads to another. And I ended up doing more things with archives, ended up doing this MA at NYU, moving image archiving and preservation, never expecting that I was going to be the director of the program. But I was really in a lot of dismay to see the status of Latin American archives. I think that there's a lot that has been done, but I think all over the place there's a very schizophrenic culture of archives, because the way our cultural infrastructure is set, many institutions depend on the state. And so many places are state funded. That means that everything is extremely bureaucratic and extremely slow. I'm just coming from Barcelona and looking at Spanish culture, and like, I know where this is coming from. Now, the amount of bureaucracy for any single procedure. And also realizing that the memories that the common citizen have of the national heritage of cinema is always very fragmented. It's most of the times very close to the concept of affect. People remember a television series. People remember a special actor. People remember a movie that was a blockbuster. People also remember the films that their parents took them to see when they were kids. I'm, for example, a Peplum film person. My father used to love Quo Vadis, Ben-Hur, uh, those films. And so, like, not understanding, you start to study this and you start to see that those big films, particularly, we had been very dependent on everything that is European, later US cinema related, precisely because of dependency on technology. We have always been consumers. Now that's the way that the film industries were born in Latin America, and they were born pretty much very close to the moment when 1895, where we see the first images in movement. By the turn of the century, there are already people making films in Latin America. And so I was very curious about this, and I did the MA, and my thesis project was an assessment of the main archives, the main film archives in Latin America. Because, of course, I had to reduce the scope of content. It was very difficult to contemplate TV archives that are also very important. And what Joanna was saying, this gap that we have between what I call the major archives, which those are the state-funded big, like cinematheques, filmotecas, museums of cinema, etc., and the tiny small archive that a collector has, a union, a former collective of women, an indigenous community, a gay community that probably is thinking we should be compiling our materials, and like seeing the gap in the language, the gap in resources, the gap also in the drive when things are owned by communities versus when things are owned by the state. So this program that you have, the Audiovisual Preservation Exchange, it's not my idea. That was actually created in my university in 2008 by a great professor and a woman that we really admire in the profession, Mona Jimenez. She had this idea with one of these internal academic grants to create a program and take it to Ghana. And the program was very good, excellent, well thought of, but it was this traditional collaboration of Americans and Europeans. We have, pardon my honesty, but we have like a long tradition of just sitting down and waiting for the Europeans and the Americans to bring the solution, which has always been very colonizing. And so I think that that was a little bit the drive, although there was a lot of involvement of the community in Ghana. Then nothing happened until 2009, the FIAF, the International Federation of Film Archives annual meeting took place in Argentina. So another professor, Dan Stribel, decided to gather a group of students because one of the people that had graduated, Paula Felix Didier, had become the director of the Museo del Cine, the Film Museum Pablo Ducros Hicken. Museo del Cine in Buenos Aires is really the national cinematheque. Some of you probably know that a complete copy of Metropolis was found there and was later restored by the Murnau Foundation. So that also changes like all the scholarship that we did on Metropolis, because until this year, 2009, 2010, we saw an incomplete copy of Metropolis. So that's another story, but it's very underfunded. It's owned by the city. It's not owned by the state. There is Buenos Aires is really like a immigrant city, like a melting pot. And so there is every kind of collection there, but it's extremely underfunded. And it's a museum probably as big as this, the collection, but it has moved, I think, 8 or 9 times. Moving a museum of cinema is horrible. So then by 2013, I was completing the program, and I already had notions of the Apex 2009 and the Apex 2008, but I was doing my thesis, and my thesis was this assessment of National Archives. And what I started to see is that people will give me an official version when the director of the archive or the technical director was around, and then there will be always somebody that says, I'll walk with you to the bus. What really happens here is that. And I started to hear those minor voices, and I realized, I'm sorry. Thank you, Joanna. And I started to realize this is not gossiping and it's just not venting. People have a story um, to tell about the archive that is an alternative version to the official story of the archive. So they will share with you about collections that were endangered. They will share with you about needing resources. They will share with you about getting resources that they thought were not being well used for the collections that needed to be a priority. And I think that we started to build like a community, like a secret, secret literally of community. And I proposed that year. I have always had a lot of support from my institution, from NYU. I proposed that year, what if the students ran the program? And so we took it to Colombia. We had a lot of support from the company, one of the companies that is facilitating this movie today. And because I have heard all those voices, and I realized these people know a lot about archives, and they have thought of a lot of solutions in spite of how precarious some places are. I wanted to make a focus of Apex, not the vertical knowledge that we could bring as coming from the United States, but thinking how can we trade knowledge, no? And that's called trueque in Spanish, no? Is what indigenous communities used to do because there was not the concept of money. No. So people used to exchange things. I'll give you salt and you give me corn. I'll give you a hammock and you give me a bag or something like that. So the way that Apex has worked is really trying to validate local knowledge. And it's a project that takes place every summer for 2 weeks. We take students, alumni, and friends of the program, and we mainly listen to what are the needs of an archive. And we had learned to balance because, of course, the state archives had like a lot of support from the government, the Ministry of Culture, better structure. So what we try to do is work with a big archive and to the shadow of the big archive, draw the smaller archives to come and participate in the workshops, in the conversations, find solutions together. That's how we have been doing this.
That's great. And with the class, we saw a video that you shared with us about, I think it was the Apex in Chile. And it was very interesting to see how people really work together. Can you tell us a little bit more about how really a day in the Apex workshop looks like?
There's another Colombian here, Luis Felipe. No, and we were talking about film festivals, and because most of the things that we had done in Latin America throughout the history of cinema are really an imitation of European patterns and American patterns. So something that really worried me is that every time that you are going to do something with the state in Colombia, with the Ministry of Culture, the Secretary of Culture, something in which the government is involved, they always need, and I guess it's because they have to show results. That's what they say in Spanish, no, mostrar resultados. So you always waste one day with a red carpet, no, and then parading and like wearing a beautiful dress, and then all these people that have no idea what an archive is, how important to keep cultural heritage, audiovisual heritage is. They want to be interviewed, and then they kind of showcase you because they are from NYU, because they are from an American university. So it's precisely everything that you don't want to happen, because you want to establish a dialogue that is horizontal, that is at the same level. So one of the things that we don't do is accept any kind of pompous opening ceremony. So we just land where we decide to go. The program has happened in Ghana 2008, Argentina 2009. I didn't participate in those. Then 2013 up to date, they had been in Colombia, Uruguay, Argentina again, Chile, Spain, Brazil, Puerto Rico, and then we have had, because of the pandemic, 2 online versions. And this year we are going to the south of Mexico, to Chiapas. So I think that the basic days also relates to how we prepare. Now, we first do a consultation with the people that are going to work with us on what do they want to do with us, what kind of support they need. And also, we want to learn from them, because in audiovisual heritage, there are a lot of procedures that have disappeared, or there are a lot of materials that, for example, in a country like this one, where we have like a very well organized archive and resources, even in the States, not everybody gets to work with nitrate. Nitrate is highly flammable. So that was not the situation when we went to Argentina. In Argentina, even after nitrate stopped being used for films, 1954, they kept making films in nitrate, particularly the Navy. So there was like a real backlog of nitrate films. For our students, that's a treat, because they don't get to work with nitrate on a daily basis. So it has to be like a win-win situation. In Puerto Rico, if you think about television, we had like the 70s and 80s, the 2-inch tapes that required those big magnetic machines to be broadcasted. We don't have many of those in the States anymore. So in Puerto Rico, well, Puerto Rico is part of the States, but in Puerto Rico, it was wonderful that they still have one machine and the students learn how to thread it. So it's not only teaching and telling them this is the way that you should be doing the things, but also learning from how they are doing the things. So the tasks are stated before we go. The night before we have our first day, we have like a big meal. We get the teams together. And then the first day, we don't waste any time in long speeches. We get to know people and get gloves, get a mask, get your old t-shirt, and let's get to work. So we get piles of what people are going to be doing, and we start to work, but we also become very good friends because we go for lunch with the people from the archive. We do a couple of parties. We go to a couple of bars in the afternoon. So we become really close to them. But everybody knows what they have to do every day. And then the last day, we close with a round table of what we learn and what collaborations we see to the future.
Now, since I think we'll need time to talk about this very challenging restoration project, Europari, the television series of which we are going to see one episode today. Did I understand correctly that it started during Apex?
Yes, this is one of the projects that was listed when we did Apex 2013 in my country, Colombia. We mostly work with the National Archive and some independent experimental filmmakers, a university. And so there was already concern about the preservation of this series, which is called Yurupari. You are going to see the name in the film. It's an indigenous word. And this is a series that was made between 1982, was pre-production, and the series was done in 1983 to 1986. It was ended because of political reasons. And you are going to see that it's a very 1980s style, traditional style to document the life of indigenous people. But we started by doing some consulting on the audio reels because, of course, at this time, people were not working with synchronic sound. The sound used to be done with an agra. And they had questions on what to do with those 765 reels that have interviews, rehearsals of musicians a cappella, local sound. So it's like a very mixed collection. And then I think that when I graduated, I proposed for them to write a grant for the International Federation of Television Archives, Fiat IFTA, and we got it. So the very first 6 documentaries that we restored with that grant had a lot of consulting with Apex. So there was like a lot of ideas on how to write the grant, how to approach the project, how to think of it as a whole. It has not really come like that, but at least it facilitated the project going on. You're only going to see 1 episode. Actually, you're going to see 2 episodes. This is a TV program that used to be made in Colombia in those years, 1982 to 1984. And it was about customs, traditions, knowledge of mestizos, which is the mix of indigenous people and white people, Afro descendants, and indigenous communities. And it's very traditional. You are going to see the voiceover. It was directed. Most of the episodes is 64 episodes, and most of them, 56, were directed by Gloria Triana, that you have here on the screen. And I was very puzzled by this because when you see this kind of recording, you see who here is from anthropology, sociology, visual anthropology. So you have like everything that is criticized these days. No, actually, it used to be called the voice of God, la voz de Dios. No, when you have the filmmaker explaining the world to you. So it seems like they had no voice. But I realized A is the only inventory that we have of indigenous and Afro-descendant cultures before the revision of the Colombian Constitution in 1990. In the revision of the Colombian Constitution, many of these groups acquired the concept of citizenship. But also, if you know anything about Colombia, it's probably Pablo Escobar, cocaine, coca, drug dealing, guerrilla groups. I don't have a problem with that. That's the bloody, shameful history of my country, but it's the history that we have. So what also happened is that in the 90s, the presence of guerrilla groups, paramilitary, violence from the state, and particularly drug dealing that is based on coca leaf. Coca leaf is not bad, it's actually medicinal and it's very good. It's the product of it, the cocaine that is chemical, came to these cultures. And these cultures nowadays are pretty much erased. So when I think about what audiovisual heritage is, this is really the living memory that we have of populations that have disappeared. You are going to see in the documentary also that they were seriously threatened by American missionaries. The Summer Linguistics Institute was for many years in Colombia with no regulation, and they were teaching English to our indigenous communities and changing their religions. So there's also like the imposition of the Bible. That is a revival of what happened 5 centuries before with the presence of the Spanish in these territories. Situation has changed in Colombia. We have like policies now to defend territory and knowledge. And now we have a little bit more of care and protection for indigenous languages, indigenous knowledge. And I think that this is why it's not only because it was directed by a woman. This was one of the few filmmakers working in the 80s, but also of how precious this heritage is for a past that had been erased from the history of the country.
Great. Yes. What I was discussing with you earlier today, and I think it's very important to share, is working with communities. In this case, has not been easy, I understand. So the whole question of restitution of heritage, it's still a big question in this case, right?
It is. And what happens when you are working with these projects is, of course, that you are working with the machinery of the state. So there are many things that the National Archive wants, that the owners, this is owned by Señal Memoria, which is the public TV, and Proimágenes, which is, as Luis mentioned, a company that is oriented to film production. And when you are an archivist and you are immersed in the discussion, in the conversation about how to save film heritage, and you become more aware of what this might mean for the communities, which is different from what it means to you as a westernized being. um, I think I have come to this project wanting to do something else, but I do have to acknowledge that it's been really difficult. We are a little bit behind in discussions of decolonizing the archive and giving back these images to the communities to allow them to decide what do they want to do with them, because the history of colonizing with images is also that we as westernized beings go to many places and we take our cameras out and we film. Now we do Instagram and we do geolocation. And so places that were very remote suddenly become very popular because they are in every single Instagram with a hashtag. In the past, it was this documentary is actually, this is a series that is very much dear to Colombian TV watchers of the 80s. So I think a lot of people, for example, in Colombia, associate my name with the rescue of this series, and people remember that Sundays at 9 p.m. the TVs will say Audiovisuales presenta Yurupari, and it was very interesting because now we travel a lot, but in the 80s, these were like terra incognita. This is very close to the Amazon now. So like going there was extremely difficult. Now there are places of the Amazon that really looks like Amazon Disneyland. Now very like very spruce for the tourists. People just go take the picture. But this is the mid 1980s. So people were always very surprised to think, wow, we have this in our country. We have these cultures in our country because they look very exotic. And so there was also like this sense of foreignness of the image, that we didn't have regional TV. We didn't have, of course, internet TV, video on demand. The offer of TV was very limited. So this was kind of a percolator for people to get to know this is part of your country. So some of the images that I have here relate to this. This is Gloria, the director, interviewing Leandro Diaz, who was a blind singer. These are like some other interviews. And this is another thing that is very important about Yurupari. For some reason, the people that work in this Yurupari series, the crew, the names at certain point of the history of television, the credits were deleted. In the restoration process, I have inserted, I had done the research, who did the camera, who did the sound, who did the scouting, and I had reinserted those credits. And this is the director of photography of many of the episodes, Jorge Ruiz. He died he electrocuted himself by accident in New York. So you also become very aware of, there are many questions that I could have asked this guy, but he's no longer around. Yeah. And then these are like more pictures. And I have some pictures here of some other episodes that we have restored. This is from Chocó, which is in the Colombian Pacific. And then this is about mining in Colombia. What I think is very interesting about this is that this is 1984, 1985. We have a big problem with economic extractivism in Colombia and mining. And if you look at the news of my country these days, the most cases of violence are against people that are defending the environment and the territory. There is a real war against those that are environmentalists. And this is like when I mentioned that this TV series that you are going to see apparently looks so innocent was taken out of the TV because of political reasons, is because Gloria, who is an anthropologist, Gloria Triana, the director, she started to filter this criticism into a show that was supposed to be show and tell. Now, and so she started to criticize the way mining was happening in Colombia. And this is 1984. It's been almost 40 years, and we are exactly in the same point with the problems of mining in Colombia. It's not only very bad for the environment, it has really taken people away from their properties. It's very dangerous. And as a country, we don't see the money from those mines. Colombia is a country that is very rich in mines. So it was because of that, the very last episode, which was the portrayal of a former guerrilla leader, was banned by the then Ministry of Communications, and then she decided to give up the series. And when Joanna was talking about restitution, we had made efforts, but this is where we really collide. This is in the north part of Colombia. We came back. These musicians were the topic of one of the episodes. It's very beautiful music from Colombia. It's gaita music, like pipes. Two of them died during COVID, so there is only one left. These people are like 90 years old. But I really wanted to have interviews with them. Now, I really wanted to see how much they remember about making the documentary, how the culture has changed. What do they want to do with that documentary that depicts their lives in the 80s? But the understanding of the government is very difficult, is very different, so it became like a carnival now. And the director of the National Archive kept using the word folklore, which in Spanish does not mean the same as in English. It's a little bit pejorative because it's not really folklore, it's another knowledge, another kind of knowledge. But this also, like a lot of politicians, you can see the mayor of Bogota here. She was not part of the tour, but then she realized that this was an opportunity to proselytize. So she was not the mayor, she was running for mayor, so she decided to come that night. But what I think is very interesting is that people were very moved. It's been 30 years, they had never seen this documentary. They knew there was a documentary made about their grandparents. And so people go into this exercise. That's me. I was 4 years old. That's my aunt. That's my grandfather. But I want to do this in a more organized way. And my main concern is that the community gets to decide what do they want to do with knowledge that was taken from them without consulting with them, how they were going to be portrayed. This is a more recent picture of Gloria. She's 82 now, but I think that we have done our job of interviewing her, recording her, getting her version. We are missing the version of the community, which is very important.
Thank you. Now, I see the time. We like to open to the audience for questions. I know there are a couple of questions from the students. The first from Nook.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this conversation. I was wondering how the pandemic has changed the apex conservation and archiving process. So, for example, how the access to archives has changed and how the horizontal dialogue amongst the participants have altered in the pandemic as well. And what measures were taken to continue local and on-site involvement regarding archiving?
Thank you, Anu. That's a wonderful question. I think that the pandemic weakened so many things, but also made so many things stronger. Like one of the things that the pandemic really allowed us was to see where our collaborations are. How are we really connected? And so, of course, we couldn't do anything in situ. We did the online workshops for Video nas Aldeias, which is an indigenous video community in Brazil, in Olinda. And we also invited people from Chiapas, who are the people that we are going to be working with this summer, San Cristóbal de las Casas. Very different indigenous communities. The San Cristóbal de las Casas in particular, because they come from the Zapatista. You remember the Zapatistas in Mexico, the Zapatistas tradition. They have a lot of contact with European organizations, NGOs, and they have done a lot of work in sovereignty, self-determination, stewardship of their materials. They had like a very well-organized community media organization, and they are starting to think about their archive. They have worked for 30 years. So we could only work online, but I think that very difficult things that happened during the pandemic, such as the crisis of the Brazilian Cinematheque, we realized the network that Apex have created, which really gathers a lot of people from Latin America and a lot of friends in other countries, we realized there was never like a letter written by the directors of archives in Latin America in solidarity with Brazil. The letters came from us, like pushing, not from Apex, but from the people that work with Apex. Let's write to FIAF. Let's talk to Giovanna Fossati. Let's talk to Dan Stribble. Let's talk to the people in MoMA. So we saw that force going on there. Then the other thing is that I have always thought, or at least for the 10 years, that Latin America needs a digital hub because many things are happening online. There's also like a change of generation in the archives. And I think in that regard, Cinemateca de Bogotá, which is very different from the National Film Archive in Colombia, they did wonderful programming during the pandemic. Because if you think a little bit more about what happened in the pandemic, archives never closed, libraries never closed. People kept getting content. People kept down. On the contrary, it became more lax. People were downloading material, and people were just like trading. Now trading a lot of material. So what happened also during the pandemic that was very beautiful, and I am very thankful to the Cinemateca in Bogota, is that they organized a series of conferences, particularly around the topic of restaurados, restored films, that gather restoration processes that are happening in Latin America. And they invited many of the people that had worked with Apex, Rafael de Luna, Paula Félix Didier, Carolina Capa. And so they kind of brought all these projects together with a couple of Juruparis.
Thank you very much.
And now we have a question from Sam there.
So my question is about funding of the APEX has been mainly done through the support of various institutions and donors. How does APEX get funding? What does it need to be to become a sustainable project?
Thank you. I think that for it to become a sustainable project, somebody will have to give up her job and create something that is only APEX. It takes a lot of time. So that's a very good question because sometimes the students have asked me, why don't we make it for credits? And I'm being a little bit reluctant to that because then it becomes very institutional. We need to have a syllabus. We need to have a pass-fail system. And so like the spontaneity and the drive to collaborate and to learn without expecting payment in the form of a grade is lost. So we had the support of the Dean of Teach School for the Arts, Cinema Studies Department. For a couple of years, we had the support of the World Cinema Fund, and the funding that we had gotten from the World Cinema Fund from the Film Foundation has been devoted to the expenses of students. I use some of my research budget, but some of the things that we do that I think are more important is to keep the project very low cost. So no fancy hotel, no limousine for anybody, no champagne glass to open Apex. You probably watched the one that we did in Chile. My students told me, countries like Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, eating meat, barbecue, asado, is big celebration. It's not what they eat every day. So we had Polo, who just passed away, every single day telling the community, los gringos están aquí, the Americans are here to help us organize the archive. That's an archive that is basically a counter archive against Pinochet, against Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. So my students came and told me the last day, but 4 of us are vegetarians and we don't want to eat meat. And I told them, no worries. So I got them a little stove, like the ones that Latin American ladies used to sell stuff on the streets. And I brought them lentils, carrots, potatoes, celery. And I told them, you make your lentils, we'll make our meat. No, but you are going to participate. So everything is very low cost. We share Airbnbs, we share rooms. And also for anybody that is thinking it would be wonderful to do something like this, it's good to keep in mind that communities also want to give out. and it's a way to decolonize a program. Now, creating the responsibility that you have to provide anything. And so sometimes they come with one room, sometimes they come with a plane ticket, sometimes they tell us all we can do is offer mid-morning snack or the same lunch that people have here. That was the case in Argentina. So people do not know that Argentinians eat a lot of squash. Now, it's part of the diet. People think that it's asado, empanadas, risotto, and pasta all the time. The everyday diet of workers is very different. We ate with the employees every single day. There were 2 big trays of mushroom lasagna, corn lasagna, squash lasagna, and we every single day we sit with them and eat hot Coca-Cola, water, juice, whatever it is. But they love to contribute. They really love to being able to offer something. So this is the money that we save. We try to invest it in helping them with technology that they might be needing.
I have a follow-up question on this line, and that is, could you imagine to open Apex to students from other programs? For instance, the program in Amsterdam?
Love to. This is something that we are discussing as a program because I volunteered to lead Apex when I was a student of the program in 2013. And because of the network that was woven around my thesis, so it became like a domino effect. So it was Uruguay, Chile, Argentina. One year we took it to Spain, but to the south of Spain, Cartagena. But that was because it was a recommendation from the people in Uruguay. And then we had never really intended for the Apex to happen only in Latin America. As a matter of fact, we tried to work with Iris from Albania, and we also have an invitation from Thailand and another one from Malaysia. I have had a person from Egypt and another person from Ethiopia asking for help because they like the notion of the program. And so we just 2 weeks ago created an advisory board for Apex. So we had Mona, a former student that has gone like to 3 or 4 Apex, a person that has been working with me in Apex since 2013, Pamela Bisner, Rafael de Luna, and myself. We're going to be the advisory board because what we want to do is a set of guidelines in such a way that if a University of Amsterdam says, we want to do an Apex in, I don't know, Turkey, and I cannot go, and somebody from NYU can go, the guidelines are there. And the guidelines are, for example, that decolonize the way you do it, low budget, no red carpet, nobody charges for workshops, nobody charges for lectures. Like those guidelines are clear. So that's the expectation, that is not always going to be onto my shoulders, but that we start to pass the baton to other people.
Great. So we have a few minutes for 1 or 2 questions. Anybody?
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question about the documentation of this sort of collaborative model, because it sounds like it's a very kind of alternative or non-institutional form of collaboration. Would you document how you collaborate? And were there platforms that you would also share sort of this model to other perhaps communities or organizations that might be doing similar forms of sort of collaborative archiving practices?
Yeah, thank you. That's our Achilles heel, because we never thought that Apex was going to last so many years and that it was going to get so big. It didn't really start. It's very tautological, but it never really started with an archival frame. So there were like a lot of photos taken in Ghana, 2008, and then a lot of photos taken in Argentina in 2009, but our archive is a mess. No, our own archive of Apex, I am so ashamed to say this, is such a mess. We did a fundraising a couple of years ago and a report to the Film Foundation of what we have done with the funding that they provided. And before I forget, I also want to acknowledge that this film has been preserved with the support of the Fiat IFTA Save Your Archive grant, with the support of Apex in the writing of the grant. But I want to acknowledge, because it's my duty, fundraising is very important in donor cultivation more so, and we are very grateful for that support. We did an activity to report to the Film Foundation that was called I Know What You Did Last Summer. No, and so what we did in I Know What You Did Last Summer was to showcase some of the shorts and the films that had been restored with the support of Apex. And this year, I am just very lucky. It's a very, 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 very lucky for young people that are pursuing this career and the ideas that they bring. One of my students is doing her thesis on archiving in the Google Drive, because Google Drive was not intended to be an archive. But those of you who teach, you know that we tell the students, do you have a copy of this? It's in the drive. And everything that we say these days, we say it's in the drive. No, I put it in the drive. So we have some kind of blind faith that the things are in the drive, like in a trunk. So we will go and fish and get them out eventually. And so she's doing her thesis on archiving in the Google Drive, and the case study is Apex. So now, through mentoring this student, we have like a list of tasks that we have to do, and we have an idea on how to start to organize the archive. And I am planning to put like all the little videos, like the ones that Giovanna's class watch, online, mostly to share the model and to also get suggestions on people on how it can be improved. And where else can we get funding, of course? No.
Thank you. So I think we have to move to the screening at this point. So I'd like to thank you again, Juana.
Thank you so much. No, thank you, Joanna. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you, everybody. So as in This Is Film tradition, we are not coming back for more questions after the screening. So I hope to see you all back in 2 weeks on April 6th to talk more about Latin America, focusing on Brazil and crisis of the Cinemateca Brasileira with our guest Inés Isengard Menezes. And enjoy the screening.